My name is Richard Parks. I'm the director and founder of an organisation called Rinova Limited, which is based in Canary Wharf in London, the UK. And we're an education, training and development company. All that we had in the EduWorkNet project was to be an informal network of providers and organisations. So whereas some of the members are more formal vet networks, we have a sort of informal consortium in London. Our original role was to participate in the programme in the same way as everyone else. Obviously this was interrupted by the decision of the UK government to leave the Erasmus programme, which was confirmed in December 2020. So we're still participating actively in those aspects of EduWork that are relevant to UK organisations, like good employment practice and good practice in adjusting, for instance, to the COVID situation with work-based learning and mobility. Whereas in other areas we're doing slightly different things because, of course, some of the results of EduWorkNet we can't apply in the UK because of the lack of an Erasmus programme. So the reason we were interested in taking part in EduWork at the outset, though, was because our organisation has been involved in international cooperation in the field of vocational education for many years. It's something I've done for a long time. And we felt we got a particular side to contribute from the UK and British experience of work-based learning, as well as perhaps to learn more from partners about their perspective on transnationality and the European dimension. Work-based learning in the UK, like in many places, has a long history. I think particularly in the UK, and perhaps before many countries in Europe, there was a shift to structuring more work-based learning and competency-based learning at the workplace. I mean, I've been dealing with that since the mid-1980s. And our national vocational qualification system requires people to generate work-based evidence, so evidence generated at the workplace. So as well as that, the UK tradition differed from, for instance, the German one in many areas, one of which is people have often learned on the job. Whether it was apprenticeships or whether it was work experience, they've often learned on the job. The issue sometimes was a lack of structure about that, which is why our National Vocational Qualification System was introduced originally, was to help provide that structure for work-based learning. With regards to apprenticeships and traineeships, those are names that are given to formal government schemes. We have government schemes called apprenticeships and we have government schemes called traineeships. And the transaction and management of those differs from how those words are associated in the general public's mind. So in the general public's mind, apprenticeships are associated the way they are everywhere. Typically young people are learning their job on the workplace, introducing themselves to their first job at work with training. Our formal apprenticeship programme in the UK is actually aimed at all ages, and it's a government-sponsored initiative to finance work-based learning for aid people of all ages. So I'll distinguish between apprenticeships as they're commonly understood, which exist in the UK like they do everywhere, and apprenticeships as a government scheme, which is a particular method of financing. Companies and providers can benefit from EduWorkNet, I mean, in both the same ways and in different ways. I mean, the first thing about EduWorkNet is it's all about making connections between networks and networks of networks. And the topic is work-based learning, which of course is relevant both to providers and to companies. But there are also separate ways they can benefit. I mean, inevitably, many mobilities will be organised between providers working with their students, trainees and apprentices. In the same way that for companies, they will be able to get access to sending and receiving opportunities for people to gain work-based learning experience, either to host them in their workplace or to send them to experience a different kind of workplace. There are many barriers as well as opportunities to participate in mobility and cooperation in Europe. We obviously have the particular one in the UK that's resulted from its decision to leave the European Union, unfortunately. For others, and perhaps more broadly, rather than talk about abstract barriers, I think we live in an age where a lot is changing very fast with COVID and with adaptations. As people are often their starting point is often say what they can't do with work-based learning, what they can't do with transnational mobility. But we're finding through creative uses of new technology, for instance, virtual reality, augmented reality, simulations, that people are surprised what they can do. I don't think, though, there'll ever be any replacement for the intercultural and life-changing experiences people can have from going to study, live and work in another country. One of the things I think about EduWorkNet that has an opportunity to make a bit of a unique contribution is the fact that it's working very hard in a difficult climate right now with COVID and so on to make organic connections between companies and between providers. And this is a long-term job. But if it's successful in initially making some really productive links and new opportunities, then those can grow into something much more wide. So I think, as I said, what I think is unique to EduWorkNet is its positioning as a network of networks. That the network in each national association is connecting with networks in other countries. So that gives it its unique, I think, position to help support this agenda. What we're hoping in the UK to achieve with EduWorkNet, because it's obviously taking part in a European context, which at this very moment in time is tricky, particularly if it's tied to Erasmus+, because that, of course, is a programme we don't participate in. But I think all the principles and the good practice and the good examples will live beyond individual programmes and how they work. What we have to do in the UK, of course, is find a constructive way to engage in this agenda of work. And at the moment, the UK scheme that exists to do this is quite limited and is one way only, which is people leaving the UK. So we watch that space carefully because we want to see that opened up and be more mutual and reciprocal, in which case I think all of the good work that EduWork will have been doing will be able to rejoin it and reconnect with it again. Well, I mean, as with everybody, you know, the pandemic and COVID has had some particular impacts, quite severe. For us in the UK, the biggest impact was that we focused on the hospitality sector. We have an initiative supported by the Mayor of London and the European Social Fund to reform and modernise the way work-based learning occurs in the hospitality industry. And the hospitality industry is, I think, by common consent, the sector that's been the worst affected by COVID. And it's difficult to do that work if all the hospitality establishments are shut. As we see people coming out of that, of course, the priorities for those businesses to get back up and running and to get back to some degree of normality. But again, compounded by Brexit, there are significant labour shortages, and so companies are having to look at different ways they can train and induct and retain the apprentices, the trainees, and the staff that they have. So, whilst it's been a very severe and negative impact in the short term, you know, you have to rely on the creativity and innovation of companies working with their providers to find new ways forward to the new challenges we face. Well, my personal highlight in EduWorkNet, I'm going to be a bit insular and talk about the partners and say that last night we were in a restaurant watching bouzouki dancing, and there was some very good technique on show.